First Latino WWE champion, Triple Crown winner. Pedro Morales was a wrestling boss, but WWE owes him a big apology. And here's why. Pedro Morales was a wrestling superstar in the 1970s, a true legend in the world of the WWF. He achieved a level of fame only a few wrestlers have ever reached, holding the championship title for an incredible 1,027 days. That's almost 3 years straight. From 1971 to 1973, he was the face of the company, defending his title against all challengers. But a championship can't be that special, right? Then what made Morales so special? Well, he was incredibly charismatic and had a deep connection with the fans. But more than that, he was a first. Pedro Morales was the very first Latino champion in WWE history, making the way for many future superstars. His exciting matches and undeniable charm made him a beloved figure in the world of professional wrestling. Everything looks good, then where's the controversy? Apparently, the way his championship reign ended is still debated by wrestling fans even today. In 1973, Morales faced Stan Stasiak in a match that had a very controversial finish. Both wrestlers' shoulders were pinned to the mat simultaneously. A double pin. The referee awarded the victory and the championship to Stasiak, but many people watching, then and now, believe that Morales' shoulders weren't down for the full 3 count. This controversial ending has led to decades of speculation. Did the referee make an honest mistake? Was it a deliberate move to create buzz and controversy? Or was it all part of the planned storyline? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Whether you loved him or loved to hate him, you can't deny he was robbed by WWE. They did not give him the space and recognition he deserved, and some say it's because he was Latino. The thing is, Pedro Morales holds a special place in wrestling history. He was the first Triple Crown champion in WWE, meaning he held the WWE Championship, the Intercontinental Championship, and the Tag Team Championship during his career. That's a huge deal. But despite these incredible achievements, it feels like WWE hasn't given Morales the recognition he truly deserves in recent years. Just think about it. When WWE celebrates its legends, names like Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Shawn Michaels are front and center. Pedro Morales? Not so much. He's rarely mentioned on WWE programming, hasn't been prominently featured in video games, and isn't celebrated in merchandise like other legends from his era. Fans have speculated about why this might be, but some critics have also said it could be because his peak years were in the 1970s, and newer audiences aren't as familiar with him. Or is it just an unfortunate oversight? Whatever the reason, many believe WWE should do more to honor Morales and his groundbreaking contributions to the industry. If you thought this was shady enough, hold your horses. Morales' departure from WWF was also quite strange, to be honest. In the mid-1980s, Pedro Morales left the WWF, now WWE, and his departure has always been a bit of a mystery. While there wasn't any public drama, it's been suggested that creative differences and frustration with his role in the company may have played a part. By that time, Morales was no longer the top star he had been in the early 70s. He had transitioned into a mid-card role, often wrestling in secondary matches rather than headlining the big events. For someone who had carried the company as its champion, this shift may have been hard to accept. Though Morales' exit wasn't as dramatic as some other wrestling departures, it still marked the end of an era for one of WWE's most iconic figures. Another surprising event happened in 1983. Morales was at an event in Boston when he got into a fight with a fan. People said the fan was saying mean things about where Morales came from, and Morales just couldn't let it slide. Things got heated and they ended up in a physical fight. This caused some legal trouble for Morales, which is really surprising because he was usually so peaceful. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly what happened because not many details were shared about the incident. Later on in the late 1980s, Morales faced another challenge, this time with the law. He was accused of not paying his taxes for several years, which is called tax evasion. This is a serious offense, and it created a lot of stress in his life. He eventually settled the issue, but it caused money problems that lasted for a long time. As if that wasn't enough, Morales faced even more difficulties as he got older. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a serious illness that affects how you move and can make everyday life really hard. And to make matters worse, the money problems from his earlier tax issues continued to cause stress for him and his family. But even with all these challenges, Pedro Morales never gave up. He was strong and determined, and he kept fighting through everything. He was a true inspiration to his fans, showing them that you can overcome difficult times if you keep your head up and never lose hope. He was admired not just for his wrestling skills, but also for his strength and resilience in the face of adversity. Sadly, Pedro Morales got very sick with Parkinson's disease. It got so bad that he couldn't even travel to Puerto Rico, where he was from. He also had heart problems and cancer. Morales died on February 12, 2019, in New Jersey. He was 76 years old. His wife was with him, but their son had already passed away in 2014. So what's the takeaway here? Pedro Morales was more than just a wrestler. He was a pioneer. As the first Latino WWF champion, he broke barriers and paved the way for future stars like Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. His connection with fans was unmatched, and his passion for the sport made him an unforgettable figure in wrestling history. Yes, his career had its controversies: the disputed title loss, the fan altercation, the tax issues. These moments showed that Morales, like all of us, was human. But they don't overshadow the incredible legacy he left behind. Even if WWE hasn't celebrated him as much as he deserves, fans will always remember Pedro Morales as a trailblazer, a champion, and a hero. His story is one of glory, resilience, and breaking down barriers. And that's something that should never be forgotten. In a little attempt to celebrate this legacy here, we have a quick rundown of his epic career from the start to the end. Born on October 22, 1942 in the small Puerto Rican island of Culebra, Pedro grew up surrounded by a huge family. And when I say huge, I mean huge! 85 cousins on his mom's side alone. He used to joke that most of Culebra's population was related to him. As a teenager, Pedro moved to Brooklyn, New York, to live with his aunt and finish high school. That's where his love for wrestling began. A friend introduced him to a local wrestling club, and let's just say, Pedro was hooked. At just 13 years old, Pedro started competing as an amateur wrestler. He was also a pretty good baseball player, so good in fact that he was drafted by Puerto Rico's professional league at 16. But Pedro had already made up his mind. Wrestling was his passion. With his dad's permission, Pedro began his professional wrestling career at just 17 years old. He trained hard, debuted in New York City in 1959, and never looked back. Pedro's early years were all about gaining experience. He wrestled across the U.S., Virginia, North Carolina, even British Columbia, facing tough opponents and teaming up with other talented wrestlers. Slowly but surely, Pedro made a name for himself. By the early 1960s, Pedro was on fire. He won matches, formed tag teams with legends like Miguel Perez Sr., and built a loyal fan base. In 1965, Morales joined WWA, a wrestling promotion based in California, and made a big impact right away by defeating The Executioner in his debut match. Over the next few months, he racked up wins against opponents like the Axeman, El Verdugo, and the Hangman. Behind the scenes, he also beat well-known wrestlers like Jesse Rose, Charlie Kalani, and Luke Graham multiple times. On March 12, 1965, Morales hit a major milestone by defeating the Destroyer Dick Beyer to win the WWA World Heavyweight Championship in a three-fall match. He then took on tough competitors like Horst Wessel and Kurt von Stroheim. Morales often teamed up with Luis Hernandez in tag matches, facing opponents like the Assassins and the Butcher. Although Morales lost the championship to Luke Graham in July 1965, he bounced back by defeating Graham in a brutal three-fall chain match, earning the Brass Knuckles Championship. Later that year, in October, Morales won back the WWA World Heavyweight Championship by defeating Graham again. During this time, he dominated opponents like Ox Anderson and Killer Carl Cox and formed new alliances in tag team matches. In 1966, Morales expanded his career by wrestling in Japan, where he faced international stars like Giant Baba and Mishiaki Yoshimura. Back in California, he entered a heated rivalry with Buddy Austin, losing and later regaining the WWA World Heavyweight Championship. Morales and Hernandez also won the WWA World Tag Team Championship, making Morales a dual champion for over a month. By 1967, Morales was teaming with Ricky Romero and Pepper Gomez, winning multiple tag team matches. He and Romero captured the WWA World Tag Team Championship in February, while his partnership with Gomez earned them the American Wrestling Alliance World Tag Team Championship. In singles matches, Morales continued to shine, defeating names like Paul Diamond and Killer Carl Cox. In 1968, Morales kept up his success, teaming with partners like Mil Mascaras to win important matches. He faced tough opponents like Freddie Blassie, Mike DiBiase, and Carl Gotch. That year, Morales challenged Gene Kiniski for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, but came up short. Despite a few losses, Morales' winning streaks and championship victories cemented his reputation as one of the best wrestlers of his time. By late 1968, Morales joined 50th State Big Time Wrestling in Hawaii full-time. He quickly made a name for himself by defeating Curtis Yaukia to win the NWA Hawaii Heavyweight Championship. He also claimed the NWA North American Heavyweight Championship by beating Kiniski. Morales formed successful tag teams with wrestlers like Don Leo Jonathan and Ed Francis. In 1969, Morales continued dominating the competition, defeating top wrestlers like Rocky Montero and Gorilla Monsoon. He and Francis won the Hawaii Tag Team Championship, adding to his growing list of achievements. Although Morales lost and regained the North American Heavyweight Championship a few times, his consistent performances kept him at the top. As 1970 began, Morales faced challengers like Johnny Buren and Tank Morgan, defeating them in key matches. He also reclaimed the Hawaii Tag Team Championship with Bing Ki Lee and won big matches against opponents like Abdullah the Butcher. By mid-1970, Morales returned to California, teaming with Rocky Johnson and facing legends like John Tolos. In October 1976, Morales joined the American Wrestling Association full-time. From the moment he stepped into the ring, it was clear he was unstoppable. He started with an impressive undefeated streak, taking down big names like Bobby Jones, Moose Morowski, and Baron von Raschke. By the start of 1977, Morales was still crushing it, winning matches left and right. He even took on the Super Destroyer in an intense series that ended in a mix of draws and victories for Morales. But things got really interesting when he faced Nick Bockwinkel. Their rivalry gave us some thrilling matches, including a hard-fought win for Morales. As time went on, Morales began teaming with Peter Maivia, securing some big wins. But towards the end of his AWA run, he started facing tougher competition, with guys like Bockwinkel and Angelo Mosca gaining the upper hand. Next up, Morales moved to Championship Wrestling from Florida. Right out of the gate, he defeated Pat Patterson, starting another hot streak. Teaming up with Rocky Johnson, they dominated the tag scene, taking on the likes of Ivan Koloff and Mr. Saito. However, his singles career wasn't all smooth sailing. A feud with Don Morocco gave Morales mixed results, but he still managed to come out on top more often than not. He even had a shot at the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against Harley Race, but fell short. Morales and Johnson went on to win the NWA Florida Tag Team Championship twice in early 1978, showing their dominance in the tag team division. But after losing the titles, Morales turned his focus back to singles competition, racking up wins against names like Killer Carl Cox and Bobby Duncombe. In May 1980, Morales made his big return to the World Wrestling Federation, and fans couldn't get enough. Teaming up with Bob Backlund, the duo quickly captured the WWF Tag Team Championship by defeating the Wild Samoans. But due to a technicality, they had to forfeit the belts the next day. That didn't slow Morales down. By the end of 1980, he defeated Ken Patera to win the WWF Intercontinental Heavyweight Championship, making history as the first Triple Crown champion in WWF history. Morales then entered into heated feuds with the likes of Sergeant Slaughter and Don Morocco. His battles with Morocco were particularly intense, including a legendary Texas death match where he regained the Intercontinental title in 1981. Morales held the championship for a record-breaking 14 months, cementing his legacy. In the mid-80s, Morales made a brief comeback in the WWF. He participated in the 1985 King of the Ring tournament, where he made it to the semifinals before being eliminated by Don Morocco. He also teamed with rising stars like Tito Santana and continued to compete in singles matches. While Morales wasn't as dominant as he had been earlier in his career, he still managed to rack up wins against familiar names like Bob Orton Jr. and Greg Valentine. By 1987, Morales stepped away from the ring, leaving behind a legacy of resilience, sportsmanship, and unforgettable moments. In conclusion, Pedro Morales was not just a wrestler, he was a true trailblazer who left an indelible mark on the history of professional wrestling. As the first Latino WWF champion and the first Triple Crown champion in WWE history, he set a standard of excellence and broke down barriers for future generations of wrestlers. His reign as champion, lasting an extraordinary 1,027 days, remains one of the longest and most memorable in the sport. But it wasn't just his accomplishments that made him special. It was his connection with the fans. His charisma, passion, and ability to inspire loyalty made him a beloved figure during his time in the ring. While his career was filled with glory, it also had its share of controversies. The disputed title loss to Stan Stasiak, the fan altercation, and the tax issues he faced later in life all added layers of complexity to his legacy. These moments of adversity showed that, like all of us, Morales was human. Yet they didn't overshadow the incredible impact he had on the wrestling world. Instead, they revealed a man who was willing to fight through life's challenges, maintaining his dignity and determination despite the obstacles. And that wraps up today's look at the legendary Pedro Morales. What an incredible journey he had, right? From breaking barriers to becoming a true icon in wrestling, his story is one that deserves to be remembered. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about Pedro's legacy. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Rude was a superstar in the 80s and 90s, known for his amazing physique and his cocky attitude. He called himself ravishing because he knew he looked good, and he wanted everyone to know it. But Rude wasn't as good or as bad as you thought he was. There was a gray area to him that I'm sure you'd love to hear about today. Let's get into it. Born on December 7, 1958, Rick Rude was a major name in wrestling, known for his time in promotions like the WWF, WCW, and ECW. Rick was a four-time world champion and held some pretty big titles, like the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship 3 times, the WWF Intercontinental Championship once, and the WCW United States Championship. He was a skilled wrestler, no doubt, but he knew how to get under people's skin. He'd insult the fans, flirt with the women, and act like he was better than everyone else. Well, this takes us to his controversy, the ravishing gimmick. Rude wasn't just in shape, he was ripped. Tight, colorful trunks, flowing hair, and that cocky grin made him stand out in a world of gritty brawlers. And this is what women loved. But as much as the ladies swooned over him, their husbands wanted to beat the crap out of him. Rude's words added fuel to the fire. His signature catchphrase, "cut the music," became very iconic. He'd insult the men in the crowd, calling them fat, out of shape, and say their wives secretly adored him. His words like, "keep the little woman at home next time," stung every time, and very often he'd just pick a girl and kiss her and make very questionable remarks. Fans loved this. They'd laugh their hearts out, but the conservatives really started a protest against him. Parents didn't want their kids to see this seductive beast, and Rude did not want to see those parents either. I mean, come on. Wrestling is not for the faint-hearted. Now, without keeping the ladies aside, let's talk about Rick's feuds, because this guy wasn't just controversial outside the ring. His rivalries were outrageous. Take his feud with Jake the Snake Roberts in 1988. Rude didn't just go after Jake, he went after Jake's wife. He brought a picture of her to the ring, claimed she had a crush on him, and made it personal in a way that most wrestling feuds didn't. Fans were hooked, and it made their matches even more intense. Then there was his feud with the Ultimate Warrior. This one is legendary for its pure drama. Rude didn't plainly trade insults with Warrior. He again went so far as to involve Warrior's wife, making the rivalry feel real and deeply personal. Wrestlers hated him for how he dragged their wives and girlfriends. As much as we'd like to hate him, we really can't, because Rick's life was also a big tragedy. He was known for being tough and entertaining, but like many wrestlers, all those jumps and slams took a toll on his body. He was in a lot of pain. To deal with the pain, Rick started taking strong painkillers. This was a long time ago, and back then, wrestling didn't have good ways to help wrestlers with pain or addiction like they do now. They didn't know as much about how these pills could affect you. Sadly, Rick started needing those pills more and more. He became dependent on them. Even though he was still a great wrestler and a big star, sometimes he missed shows or acted strangely. People knew something was wrong. When he was just 40 years old, Rick died. It was a shock to everyone. Officially, they said it was from natural causes, but everyone knew his problems with addiction played a big part. It's really sad because he was so young and talented. Rick's story is a sad reminder of how dangerous addiction can be, especially in a tough job like wrestling. It also shows how important it is to have good ways to help people deal with pain and addiction. Despite these controversies, Rick Rude remains a beloved figure among many wrestling fans. His in-ring talent, charismatic personality, and ability to generate heat were undeniable. While we remember Rude for his in-ring brilliance, we must also acknowledge the darker side of his story. His life serves as a reminder that even those we admire have flaws and demons to overcome. The legacy must stay alive. If you are a true fan and have stayed till here, you have my respect. Now, to keep the legacy of our favorite wrestler alive, let's have a quick rundown of his epic career. Rick Rude, born Richard Morgan Rude on December 7, 1958, in St. Peter, Minnesota, always had a passion for sports. Before he became a wrestling icon, Rude played football at the University of Minnesota, showcasing his athleticism. This helped him transition into the world of professional wrestling, where he would make his mark. Rude started his wrestling career in 1982, training under Eddie Sharkey and Verna Ganny. His first real taste of the spotlight came when he joined the American Wrestling Association in the early 1980s. While in the AWA, he began developing his persona and honing his skills. He quickly became known for his good looks, solid wrestling ability, and cocky attitude, which would eventually lead to the creation of his famous ravishing Rick Rude character. His early days in the ring were spent learning and building his reputation in smaller promotions before getting a big break in the larger wrestling world. Rude's big break came when he joined the WWE, then WWF in 1987. That's when he introduced the ravishing Rick Rude gimmick, where he would flaunt his good looks and boast about being the most attractive man in wrestling. This persona quickly caught on, making him one of the most hated villains in the industry. Rude's first major feud was with Superfly Jimmy Snuka, which helped him get noticed by fans and promoters alike. Soon after, Rude became involved in a high-profile rivalry with Jake the Snake Roberts. This feud was personal, with Rude mocking Roberts and even insulting his wife. Their storyline became one of the most memorable of the late 80s, leading to a series of intense matches. His crowning achievement came when he won the Intercontinental Championship in 1988, defeating the Ultimate Warrior. This title win cemented Rude as one of the top stars in WWE. His reign was marked by several classic matches against opponents like Warrior and Randy Macho Man Savage, showcasing his ability in the ring and his talent for drawing heat from the audience. Rude's feuds and antics in WWE made him a mainstay on major events like the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, where his arrogance and showmanship were on full display. He would taunt fans and often give out rude awakening neck breakers to his opponents, a move that became his signature. Despite his success in WWE, things began to change in the early 1990s. In 1990, Rude left WWE due to contract disputes and creative differences. He moved to WCW, where he continued to work at a high level. He feuded with stars like Sting and Ric Flair, and even became part of the Dangerous Alliance, a villainous group managed by Paul E. Dangerously. Tragically, Rick Rude's life and career were cut short. On April 20th, 1999, he passed away at the age of 40 due to heart failure caused by an overdose. His death shocked the wrestling world, especially considering how much he had achieved in such a short amount of time. Despite his early death, Rude's legacy continues to live on. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2017, recognizing his impact on the wrestling industry. Rude was one of the most memorable heels of his time, with his larger-than-life persona and in-ring talent. Today, Rick Rude is remembered as a wrestler who knew how to work the crowd, whether as a villain or a champion. His charisma and unique character helped shape the wrestling business, and his influence can still be seen in modern wrestlers who follow in his footsteps. Thanks for sticking around and watching the full video, folks. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and career of the one and only ravishing Rick Rude. From his unforgettable charisma and controversial persona to his legendary rivalries, Rude was truly a force in the world of professional wrestling. But beyond the showmanship, Rick Rude was also a complex figure. His story is a reminder of the darker side of the wrestling world, dealing with the toll on the body, pain, and addiction. It's a sad truth, but it's part of his legacy that we can't ignore. He was more than just a cocky heel. He was a talent that left an indelible mark on the sport, inspiring future generations of wrestlers to follow in his footsteps. Now, if you're a true fan of wrestling and Rick Rude, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know your favorite Rick Rude moment or match. Was it his dramatic feuds, his signature Rude Awakening move, or perhaps his unforgettable attitude that made him one of the most hated and loved wrestlers of his time? Whatever it is, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss out on more stories from the world of wrestling and beyond. Your support helps me keep bringing these videos to you. And hey, if you know someone who's a fan of Rick Rude or wrestling in general, share this video with them. Let's keep these legends alive and keep the conversations going. Until next time, remember to keep the memories of these wrestling icons alive. Stay tuned, stay awesome, and I'll catch you in the next video. The Road Warriors crushed opponents, but one enemy they couldn't beat was their fate. Hawk and Animal dominated wrestling for years. Face paint, spikes, and raw power made them icons. But behind the scenes, there was a horror show no one knew of. Addiction, betrayal, a storyline that went too far. How did wrestling's most feared tag team crumble from within? Let's get into it from the start. Before they were the legendary Road Warriors, they were just two guys named Joe Laurinaitis and Mike Hegstrom. They started out as bouncers, which explains why they were so big and intimidating. They met while working out at a gym in Minnesota. This gym wasn't just any gym, though. It was owned by a famous wrestler and trainer named Eddie Sharkey. He saw something special in Joe and Mike, their size, their intensity, their raw potential. He took them under his wing and molded them into the wrestlers they would become. That's how the Road Warriors were born. With their mohawks, face paint, and spiked shoulder pads, they looked like they came from a Mad Max movie. But being famous is hard. It comes with problems. Joe and Mike had to deal with a lot of challenges as they became more popular. Their journey was just starting, and it was going to be tough. Let's start with something mild. Everyone loved the Road Warriors, but the other wrestlers, not so much. See, the Road Warriors had a reputation. They weren't just tough, they were brutal. They fought with a ferocity that was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. Stories started going around about how some wrestlers were so scared of the Road Warriors that they actually quit. Can you imagine being so intimidating that people would rather give up their dream job than face you in the ring? That's the kind of fear that Hawk and Animal inspired. And it wasn't just their appearance. These guys were incredibly strong. They could lift other wrestlers over their heads and slam them to the ground like they weighed nothing. Their signature move, the Doomsday Device, was a devastating combination that left opponents seeing stars. The Road Warriors were a huge draw for wrestling fans. Everyone wanted to see these incredible athletes in action. But behind the scenes, things were getting tense. Some wrestlers were genuinely worried about getting hurt. One famous example involved another tag team called the Powers of Pain. They were supposed to have a big feud with the Road Warriors, but when they learned they were going to lose, they left the wrestling company. They were that afraid of getting seriously injured in the matches. And from here, everything started to spiral down. They were living the dream, partying all the time, and everyone wanted to be their friend. But sometimes the party goes on for too long, and things get out of hand. That's what happened to Hawk. He started using drugs and got caught in a dangerous trap. It's like falling into a deep, dark hole, and it's really hard to climb back out. Animal, his best friend and wrestling partner, saw him struggling and tried to help, but it's like trying to pull someone out who keeps digging themselves deeper. Despite all this, the show had to go on. Can you imagine having to go to work and smile when you feel awful inside? That's what the Road Warriors did. Every night they put on their fierce face paint and stepped into the ring, pretending everything was okay. It's heartbreaking because they were so talented and successful, but sometimes the toughest battles happen outside the spotlight. They were dealing with the pressure of being famous and the pain of addiction. They might have been winning matches, but they were losing in life. And if you think this was terrible, you are not ready for what happened next. When they joined the WWE in 1990, things started to go wrong. The WWF changed their name from the Road Warriors to the Legion of Doom, which upset many fans. It was the beginning of a series of creative decisions that would damage the team. One of the most infamous was the introduction of Rocco, a ventriloquist dummy they were supposed to carry around. This was humiliating for the tough, no-nonsense Road Warriors, especially Hawk. Hawk, already known for his wild personality, began to struggle. He missed shows, showed up late, and sometimes disappeared altogether. His behavior became increasingly erratic, and the pressure of being in the WWF seemed to worsen things. Meanwhile, Animal was left to pick up the pieces. He tried to keep the team going, but it was tough without his partner. He felt the burden of carrying their legacy and was frustrated by Hawk's unreliability. Instead of helping Hawk, the WWF decided to exploit his struggles for a storyline. They introduced a character named Puke, who was supposed to be helping the Road Warriors, but it was clearly a reference to Hawk's personal problems. This was a new low, even for the often controversial world of professional wrestling. The Road Warriors hated this storyline. They felt betrayed and exposed. Fans were also uncomfortable watching the team they admired being exploited in such a way. This once dominant team was falling apart. Hawk was battling his demons, Animal was trying to hold everything together, and the WWF seemed determined to make things worse. Hawk and Animal weren't having it. They protested against the storyline, feeling it went way too far. But in the world of wrestling, the show must go on. And boy, did it go on. Straight into a dumpster fire. The storyline reached its lowest point with the infamous Titantron incident. Just try to picture Hawk, supposedly drunk, stumbling around on top of the massive Titantron video screen. The announcers played it up, talking about how he was under the influence. And then, in a moment that made everyone's heart stop, Hawk fell from the Titantron. It was a fake suicide attempt. For ratings. Let that sink in for a moment. The backlash was immediate and intense. Fans were outraged. Critics slammed WWF for crossing a line. Even hardcore wrestling fans who were used to over-the-top storylines felt this was too much. WWF had taken a real-life struggle and turned it into a circus act. The damage was done. The Road Warriors, once the most feared tag team in wrestling, were now at the center of one of its most controversial storylines. It was clear that something had to give, and give it did. In a move that shocked the wrestling world, Hawk and Animal walked away from WWF. The storyline had pushed them too far, and they'd had enough. But the big question remained, could they recover from this? Their reputation was in tatters, their personal lives were in turmoil, and the wrestling world was buzzing with rumors and speculation. The Road Warriors had faced countless opponents in the ring. They'd been in brutal matches, taken hard falls, and come out on top time and time again. But this was different. This was a blow to their very identity, to everything they'd built over the years. As they left WWF, many wondered if this was the end of the road for Hawk and Animal. Could they bounce back from such a public and personal disaster? Or had the Road Warriors finally met their match in the form of a storyline gone horribly wrong? The Road Warriors had hit rock bottom. Their WWF run was a disaster. Their reputation was shot. But sometimes when you're at your lowest, an unexpected lifeline appears. For Hawk and Animal, that lifeline came from a place they least expected. Where? And was it enough to save them? After leaving WWF, the Road Warriors found themselves in unfamiliar territory. They were no longer the unstoppable force that struck fear into opponents. Instead, they were scrambling for bookings on the independent circuit. It was a far cry from the packed arenas and championship gold they were used to. Hawk's demons didn't disappear just because they left the big leagues. His struggle with addiction continued, a vicious cycle of rehab and relapse. It was heartbreaking to watch. This man, once the epitome of power and intensity in the ring, was now fighting a battle he couldn't seem to win. Animal stood by his partner through it all. But you've got to wonder, how long could he keep this up? The strain was visible. In interviews, Animal's voice would crack when talking about Hawk's struggles. He was trying to hold the team together, but it was like trying to catch water with a net. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a call came from across the ocean. Japan wanted the Road Warriors. The fans there still remembered the dominant force they once were. It was a chance at redemption, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. In Japan, something magical happened. The Road Warriors found their groove again. Remember that match against Killer Khan and Animal Hamaguchi? Hawk and Animal destroyed them in under 4 minutes. The Japanese crowd went wild. It was like stepping back in time to their glory days. But was this resurgence too little? Too late? The wrestling world had changed. New stars were rising. Could the Road Warriors reclaim their spot at the top? They gave it their all, that's for sure. They competed in various independent shows across the U.S. They even won the World Tag Team Championship in International Wrestling Superstars. It was like watching old lions roar one last time, reminding everyone why they were once kings of the jungle. Their final run wasn't without its highlights. On May 12, 2003, they made their last US TV appearance, facing off against Rob Van Dam and Kane. The Road Warriors were hoping for one last shot, one final contract with WWE, but it wasn't meant to be. As the sun set on their careers, Hawk and Animal had one last tour of Japan. It was fitting, really. The country that had embraced them at their lowest was there to see them off. Their final match as a team came on October 3, 2003, in Oshawa, Ontario. They defeated Greg the Hammer Valentine and Buff Bagwell. It wasn't the grandest stage, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Road Warriors' journey was coming to an end. They had clawed their way back from the brink, showing flashes of their old brilliance. But wrestling is a young man's game, and time waits for no one, not even legends. As Hawk and Animal left the ring for the last time as a team, you couldn't help but wonder, what would be next for these warriors of the road? Just when it seemed the Road Warriors might reclaim their glory, tragedy struck. October 19, 2003. A date that would forever change the course of wrestling history. What went down that day? The Road Warriors were gearing up for a comeback. Hawk and Animal, those larger-than-life icons of the ring, were ready to tell their story. They'd started writing a book, eager to share the wild ride they'd been on for over 2 decades. Things were finally looking up, but fate had other plans. On that fateful October day, the unthinkable happened. Hawk, the man who'd struck fear into the hearts of wrestlers everywhere, was gone. Just like that, a heart attack took him at the age of 46. The wrestling world was rocked to its core. Imagine finding your tag team partner, your brother in arms, lifeless in bed. That's what happened to Hawk's partner. One minute they're packing boxes, planning for the future. The next, everything changes. It's the kind of news that makes your blood run cold. The tributes poured in faster than you could count. Wrestlers, fans, promoters, everyone had a Hawk story to tell. Remember how he'd terrorize opponents with that crazy intense stare? Or how he'd climb to the top rope, defying gravity despite his size? Those memories came flooding back as the wrestling community mourned. But what about Animal? How do you go on when half of your identity is suddenly gone? For 20 years, it had been Hawk and Animal, Animal and Hawk. Now Animal was alone, trying to make sense of a world without his partner. You've got to hand it to Animal, though. The Road Warrior spirit was strong in this one. Even in the depths of grief, he found a way to keep going. He returned to WWE in 2005, determined to honor Hawk's memory. Every match, every promo, every moment in the ring became a tribute to his fallen brother. Hawk's death wasn't just a personal loss for Animal. It sent shockwaves through the entire wrestling community. It was a stark reminder of the toll this business can take. The high-flying moves, the grueling travel schedule, the temptations that come with fame. They all exact a price. The Road Warriors' journey as a team might have ended, but their legacy, that was just getting started. Every time you see a tag team with face paint or hear the crowd roar for a powerful double-team move, you're seeing a bit of Hawk and Animal's influence. Their story isn't just about wrestling. It's about friendship, about pushing limits, about falling down and getting back up again. The Road Warriors showed us the highest highs and the lowest lows of the wrestling world. And in doing so, they carved out a place in history that'll never be forgotten. So the next time you see a pair of spiked shoulder pads or hear that iconic, "Oh, what a rush," remember Hawk and Animal. Remember the Road Warriors. Because legends never truly die. They live on in the hearts of fans and in the ring, inspiring the next generation of warriors. You've seen the face paint, heard the catchphrases, felt the rush. But do you know the real price of becoming a legend? The Road Warriors' legacy is written in more than just championship gold. It's a tale of inspiration, imitation, and the dark side of fame that still haunts wrestling today. Hawk and Animal changed wrestling forever. Their brutal style and intimidating look inspired countless copycats. But here's the thing, none of them could match the original. The Dudley Boys, Hardy Boys, Young Bucks. They all tried to capture that Road Warrior magic. But Hawk and Animal? They were one of a kind. Remember that crowd reaction when the Warriors hit the ring? It was so intense, it got its own name. the Road Warrior pop. Every tag team since has dreamed of getting that kind of response, but few have come close. But success came at a price. The wrestling world learned some hard lessons from the Road Warrior story about the dangers of fame, the struggle with addiction, the importance of loyalty. Hawk's battles with his demons weren't just personal, they became a wake-up call for the entire industry. After Hawk's passing, Animal carried on. He kept telling their story, honoring his partner's memory. It wasn't easy, but that's what warriors do. They keep fighting. Animal made sure the world didn't forget what he and Hawk had built together. Look around today's wrestling scene. You'll see traces of the Road Warriors everywhere. Face paint, spiked shoulder pads, hard-hitting tag team moves. New generations of wrestlers pay tribute, keeping the spirit of Hawk and Animal alive. But the Road Warrior's tale isn't just about glory, it's a cautionary story too. A reminder of wrestling's dark side, the toll it takes on body and mind, the temptations that come with fame. It's a legacy of power and pain, triumph and tragedy. How did Hawk and Animal become wrestling's most feared tag team? It wasn't just their look or their moves, it was their intensity, their commitment, the way they lived and breathed their characters. They weren't playing Road Warriors, they were Road Warriors. Their impact goes far beyond the ring. After Hawk's struggles came to light, the industry started to change. Wellness policies were introduced. Support systems were put in place. The Road Warriors' experiences helped shape a safer, more responsible wrestling world. Today, when you see a high-flying tag team or hear a crowd explode for a big entrance, you're seeing a bit of the Road Warriors' influence. They didn't just change wrestling, they redefined what it meant to be larger than life. So the next time you catch a glimpse of face paint or hear a crowd roar, think of Hawk and Animal. Their legacy is more than just wins and losses. It's a story of redemption, of brotherhood, of the highs and lows of life in the spotlight. The Road Warriors may be gone, but their impact, that's forever. The Road Warriors weren't just wrestlers, they were icons, legends. But their story is more than spikes and face paint. It's about life, fame, and the thin line between glory and tragedy. Hawk and Animal changed wrestling forever. They inspired countless imitators, but no one could match the original. Their legacy lives on in every tag team that steps into the ring today. But it's not all championship gold and adoring fans. The Road Warriors' journey shows us the dark side of fame, the struggles, the temptations, the price of living life in the fast lane. Their story is a cautionary tale for anyone chasing their dreams. Remember Hawk and Animal for who they really were, not just larger-than-life characters, but men who lived, fought, and left their mark on history. They weren't perfect, but they were real. And in the end, that's what makes their legacy truly unforgettable. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Hawk and Animal were more than just wrestlers. They were larger-than-life icons who changed the game forever. Their journey was full of incredible highs and heartbreaking lows. But through it all, they left a legacy that still inspires fans and wrestlers today. The Road Warriors showed us what it means to fight, not just in the ring, but in life. From their unforgettable entrance to their dominance as a team, they created moments that will never be forgotten. Sure, they faced struggles, but they also showed us the power of resilience, loyalty, and brotherhood. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your fellow wrestling fans, and drop a comment about your favorite Road Warriors moment. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories about the legends who shaped the wrestling world. The spirit of Hawk and Animal lives on in every tag team that steps into the ring, and as fans, it's up to us to keep their memory alive. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay strong, keep fighting, and always feel the rush.
Brody helps him up, and right up he'll go. All the way up. Brody with that backbreaker he's so famous for.
On 17th through July 1988, Bruiser Brody was stabbed in a shower stall and his killer walked free. How did one of wrestling's most feared men end up defenseless and alone? Why did the justice system fail him? This isn't just another wrestling story. It's a tale of betrayal, corruption, and a cover-up that's haunted the industry for decades. By the end of this video, you'll question everything you thought you knew about the dark side of professional wrestling. Before he became the wild man known as Bruiser Brody, Frank Goodish was just a regular guy from Michigan. Well, maybe not so regular. At 6'8" and nearly 300 pounds, Frank stood out wherever he went. But his path to wrestling stardom wasn't a straight line. Frank was a football star in high school and college. He even had a brief stint with the Washington Redskins in the NFL. But when his gridiron dreams fizzled out, Frank turned to journalism. Yeah, you heard that right. The man who would become one of wrestling's most feared monsters started out writing for a newspaper in San Antonio. But Frank couldn't shake the itch for competition. He stumbled into wrestling almost by accident, and that's when everything changed. The mild-mannered journalist disappeared, and Bruiser Brody was born. Frank's wife Barbara saw the transformation firsthand. She once said, "At home, Frank was gentle and kind, but when he became Brody, it was like a switch flipped. He turned into this wild, unpredictable force of nature." For example, Brody was known to shoot on his opponents, meaning he'd hit them for real or refuse to cooperate in the ring. Why? Sometimes to make a point. Sometimes because he felt like it. And sometimes, well, who knows? Take the infamous match with Lex Luger. Halfway through, Brody just stopped. He wouldn't sell Luger's moves, wouldn't play along. The match fell apart, ending in disqualification and confusion. Some say it was Brody's way of protesting a pay dispute. Others say he just didn't feel like working that night. That was Brody, always keeping everyone guessing. Promoters were caught in a real bind with Bruiser. On one hand, he was box office gold. Fans would pack arenas just to see what wild thing he'd do next. On the other hand, he was a promoter's worst nightmare. Would he follow the script? Would he hurt someone for real? Would he even show up? Every Brody match was a roll of the dice. But that unpredictability is exactly what made Brody a worldwide sensation. In Japan, he was treated like a god. In Puerto Rico, he was the biggest draw in history. Speaking of Puerto Rico, this is exactly where everything started. The beginning of his end and the reason why his life would be cut short. The Puerto Rican wrestling scene was unlike anything else in the world. Fans didn't just want to see a match, they craved violence, blood, and real-life drama. And Bruiser Brody, he gave them exactly what they wanted. His matches in Puerto Rico were the stuff of legend. Brutal affairs that left both wrestlers and audience members wondering if they'd gone too far. Remember those insane bouts between Brody and Abdullah the Butcher? Or the time he and Carlos Colon turned the ring into a battlefield? Brody's hardcore style fit perfectly with the island's appetite for destruction. But here's the thing. The danger didn't end when the bell rang. The locker rooms in Puerto Rico were powder kegs, ready to explode at any moment. Personal beefs, professional jealousies, and the blurred line between kayfabe and reality created a toxic mix there. Little by little, as Brody's star power grew, so did the tension. Now, for the murder to actually make sense, I will have to introduce to you Jose Gonzalez. Jose Gonzalez was a big deal in Puerto Rico. Known as Invader One, he wasn't just a wrestler. He was a leader in the World Wrestling Council, Puerto Rico's top wrestling promotion. But his success came with competition, and no one was a bigger threat than Bruiser Brody. For Gonzalez, Brody was more than just competition. He was a danger to everything Gonzalez had built. Rumors spread that Brody wanted a stake in the WWC, which Gonzalez might have seen as a threat to his power. Add in Brody's rising paychecks and popularity, and you had a recipe for disaster. Then there were Gonzalez's chilling words, "One day, I'm gonna end that man." At the time, everyone shrugged it off as wrestling banter. But hindsight makes those words impossible to ignore. On July 16, 1988, everything changed. It was supposed to be a normal night of wrestling at Juan Ramon Lubriel Stadium in Puerto Rico. The locker room was buzzing as wrestlers taped up and planned their matches. But according to those who were there, something felt off. Tony Atlas, one of the wrestlers in the locker room that night, later said, "The air felt heavy, like something bad was about to happen." Brody, as always, stood out, towering over everyone else as he got ready for his match. At around 7:45 p.m., Gonzalez approached him and asked him to step into the shower area to talk. That wasn't unusual. Wrestlers often discussed match details in private, but this time was different. Moments later, two screams shattered the locker room. They were loud and full of pain. Everyone froze. What was going on? Tony Atlas rushed to the shower area, and what he found was horrifying. There was Brody hunched over, blood pouring from a stab wound to his stomach. Standing over him was Gonzalez, holding a knife. The room erupted into chaos. Wrestlers scrambled, trying to figure out what to do. Brody collapsed to the floor, bleeding heavily. Paramedics were called, but when they arrived, they couldn't lift him. He was too big. Tony Atlas had to help them get Brody onto a stretcher. But the nightmare didn't end there. The ambulance got stuck in traffic outside the stadium, losing precious time. Every second counted, and Brody was running out of time. When they finally reached the hospital, doctors worked desperately to save him. Brody underwent 2 emergency surgeries, but the injuries were too severe, and the delays had cost him. That night, Bruiser Brody, the wild man who seemed unstoppable, was gone. When the news came out that Bruiser Brody had died, it felt like a punch to the gut for the wrestling world. It didn't seem real. Brody was larger than life, someone who seemed untouchable. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to him and not like this. His wife Barbara was heartbroken. She couldn't wrap her head around it. Her husband had gone through so many brutal matches and always came out on top. How could this happen now? "I know the attacker did it," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "From everything I've heard, the court case was a joke. The lack of justice made everything worse, leaving her with more questions than answers." Fans and wrestlers everywhere felt the loss. Wrestling promotions around the world held special tribute shows to honor Brody. His friends and colleagues shared stories about his wild personality and the impact he had on the business. But even with all the tributes, there was an uneasy feeling in the air. If someone as tough and respected as Brody could be killed like this, what did that mean for everyone else in the business? It was a chilling thought. As the shock started to fade, people began asking hard questions. Why was there such a long delay in getting Brody medical help? How could something like this happen in a locker room full of wrestlers? And most importantly, would anyone pay for what happened to him? The fight for answers wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't just about Brody anymore. It was about shining a light on the darker side of wrestling. Behind the flashy moves and big personalities, there were secrets and power plays that no one wanted to talk about. Justice for Bruiser Brody should have been straightforward. He was a beloved wrestling icon, and the circumstances of his death seemed crystal clear. There was a locker room full of witnesses, a suspect who didn't deny being involved, and a brutal stabbing that left Brody dead. Yet, despite all of this, justice wasn't served. The trial of Jose Gonzalez, the man accused of killing Brody, turned into a chaotic mess. It left fans, wrestlers, and anyone who followed the case wondering, how could this happen? The biggest issue was of the witnesses. Wrestlers like Tony Atlas and Dutch Mantell were there that night. They saw what happened and could have provided crucial testimony in court. But incredibly, they weren't called to testify. In fact, they didn't even get their summons until after the trial had ended. Yes, after. Imagine being invited to a birthday party after the cake's been eaten and everyone's gone home. That's how absurd this situation was. Then there was the investigation itself. The local police initially believed that Brody had been attacked by an angry fan, a fan in the locker room with a knife. Think about that for a second. A locker room is a secure area meant for wrestlers and staff. The idea that a fan could sneak in and commit such a crime was laughable. Yet that's where the police started their investigation. It was like they were solving a mystery in a bad TV show instead of dealing with a real-life murder. When the case finally made it to court, things got even stranger. In Puerto Rico, the legal system works a bit differently than in many other places. For example, a jury doesn't need to reach a unanimous decision to acquit someone. A majority vote is enough to let a defendant go free. This system played a big role in the outcome of the trial. Gonzalez claimed he acted in self-defense. He said that Brody had threatened him and he feared for his life. Without key witnesses to challenge his version of events, the jury believed him. The verdict? Not guilty. Gonzalez walked out of the courtroom a free man, despite the fact that he had stabbed someone in a locker room full of people. The verdict shocked everyone, especially those who were there that night. Tony Atlas, one of Brody's closest friends in the wrestling business, was furious. He couldn't believe what had happened. "I was there," he said over and over. "I saw it. How could they let him go?" Dutch Mantell and others who had witnessed the incident were equally frustrated and heartbroken. What made things even worse was that the prosecution didn't appeal the decision. They didn't try to fix the mistakes that had been made or fight for justice. It was as if they just gave up and accepted the outcome. For Brody's friends, family, and fans, this felt like a slap in the face. With such a poorly handled case, it didn't take long for conspiracy theories to start flying. Some people wondered if Gonzalez had connections that helped him avoid punishment. He was a local wrestling star in Puerto Rico, and many believed he may have received special treatment. Others thought there might have been a cover-up, with key evidence or testimony intentionally left out of the trial. The lack of clear answers only added to the pain. For wrestling fans, it wasn't just about losing one of their heroes. It was about the fact that justice hadn't been served. The questions surrounding Brody's death lingered, and the official story didn't sit right with anyone. Bruiser Brody's death left a deep scar on the wrestling world. He was more than just a talented wrestler. He was a larger-than-life figure who inspired countless fans and fellow wrestlers. But instead of being remembered solely for his incredible career, his legacy became tied to the tragedy of his death and the failure of the legal system to hold his killer accountable. To this day, Brody's story remains one of the darkest chapters in wrestling history. It's a reminder of how even the most straightforward cases can fall apart when systems fail and people don't do their jobs. His death also raised awareness about the challenges wrestlers face, not just in the ring, but in their personal lives and dealings with the law. Justice for Bruiser Brody wasn't just about one man. It was about holding someone accountable for taking a life and showing that no one is above the law. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Instead, the case exposed flaws in the legal process and left the wrestling community feeling betrayed and heartbroken. In an industry where legends fade quickly, one man's memory refused to die. Bruiser Brody's death shocked the wrestling world, but it's what happened next that truly cemented his place in history. How did a controversial figure become one of wrestling's most revered icons? Brody's influence on professional wrestling is like a fingerprint, unique and impossible to erase. His career spanned promotions like WWE, NJPW, and NWA, where he racked up championships and left audiences in awe. But it's not just the titles that made Brody special. It was that wild, uncontrollable persona that set the standard for future wrestlers. Think about it. Every time you see a big, scary dude stomping around the ring, swinging chains and terrifying fans, that's Brody's DNA right there. Wrestlers like Eddie Kingston, The Undertaker, and Steve Austin, they all took a page from Brody's playbook. Even modern stars like Brody King proudly carry on his legacy. King's name is a tribute to both Bruiser Brody and the late Brody Lee, showing how Brody's impact spans generations. But here's the crazy part. Brody's influence goes way beyond what happens in the ring. His tragic death exposed the dark underbelly of wrestling. Suddenly, everyone was talking about wrestler safety and legal protections. It was like someone turned on the lights in a very dark room, and nobody liked what they saw. The wrestling world couldn't let Brody's story fade away. They inducted him into Hall after Hall of Fame, WWE, St. Louis Wrestling, Wrestling Observer Newsletter. It's like they're saying, never forget this man, never forget what happened. And people haven't forgotten. Brody's life and death have become the stuff of legend. There's a podcast called The Ballad of Bruiser Brody that digs into his story. The TV show Dark Side of the Ring dedicated an entire episode to unraveling the mystery of his death. It's like the wrestling world is still trying to make sense of what happened all those years ago. So what can we learn from Brody's story? Maybe it's that true legends never really die. Or that sometimes the most controversial figures leave the biggest marks. Or maybe it's a warning about the dangers that can lurk behind the curtain in the world of professional wrestling. One thing's for sure, Bruiser Brody's legend isn't fading anytime soon. His story continues to captivate new generations of wrestling fans. It's a tale of triumph and tragedy, of a man who lived large and left us too soon. In the end, Brody didn't just change wrestling, he became a part of its very DNA. In the end, all I can say is, Bruiser Brody's death ripped the mask off professional wrestling. It showed us the ugly side of the business, the real dangers lurking behind the scenes. But Brody's legacy? It's bigger than that tragic night in Puerto Rico. Bruiser Brody's story is one of the most compelling and tragic tales in the history of professional wrestling. Known for his larger-than-life persona and untamed charisma, Brody captivated fans across the globe, leaving an indelible mark on the industry. But his untimely and violent death exposed the dark underbelly of wrestling, one rife with unchecked egos, blurred lines between fiction and reality, and a justice system ill-equipped to handle its complexities. His death wasn't just a loss for his fans and loved ones, it was a wake-up call for the entire wrestling world. It forced the industry to confront uncomfortable truths about its culture, from the dangers wrestlers faced in and out of the ring to the power imbalances behind the scenes. Brody's passing became a cautionary tale that still resonates, urging reforms in wrestler safety, accountability, and legal protections. Yet despite the tragedy, Bruiser Brody's legacy transcends his untimely end. His influence can be seen in countless wrestlers who adopted his chaotic energy, uncompromising style, and fearless spirit. From legends like The Undertaker and Steve Austin to modern stars like Brody King, his impact spans generations. His name is etched into the history books, celebrated in Hall of Fame inductions, documentaries, and podcasts that ensure his story will never be forgotten. More importantly, Brody's life and career remind us of the enduring power of wrestling's larger-than-life characters. He was a man who lived by his own rules, entertained millions, and left a legacy that continues to inspire. While justice for his murder remains elusive, his influence is undeniable, proving that legends never truly die. Bruiser Brody may have been taken from us too soon, but his spirit lives on in every wrestler who dares to defy expectations and every fan who remembers his name. Thank you for sticking with us through this incredible and heartbreaking journey into the life and death of Bruiser Brody. His story is more than just a wrestling tragedy. It's a reminder of the highs and lows of the industry we all love. If this story struck a chord with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into wrestling's untold stories. Share this video with fellow fans who need to hear about Brody's legacy and the lessons his story teaches us. What do you think about the shocking events surrounding Bruiser Brody's death? Could the wrestling world have done more to ensure justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on this heartbreaking but important chapter in wrestling history. And remember, wrestling isn't just about the moves or the rivalries. It's about the people, their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs. Bruiser Brody's story may have ended in tragedy, but his legacy reminds us why we're drawn to the ring in the first place.